Welcome back to Earthly Delights. Take a good look around your garden today. If you are gardening in the Northern Hemisphere, July can feel like one of the toughest months of the year. The heat sits heavy in the air. The sun presses down hard on the soil. The lettuce that looks so tender in spring may have bolted, stretched tall, and turned bitter. Those early cucumber vines that once looked so full of promise may now be yellowing, tired, and struggling under the weight of summer. And when you stand in a garden like that, it is very easy to believe the best part of the season is already behind you. You may feel worn out. You may think, the season is slipping away. I waited too long. I missed my chance. And honestly, isn't that how life can feel sometimes too? In a season of pressure, heat, stress, or disappointment, we can start believing it is too late to begin again. But after many years of working with soil, seeds, and changing seasons, I can tell you this: nature is one of the greatest teachers of second chances. July is not the end of the garden. In many ways, it is a hidden doorway into a second spring. Today, we are going deeper than a simple planting list. I am going to share 15 crops you may truly regret not planting this July. But more than that, we will look at why these crops can thrive in this exact moment, how to care for them when the soil feels almost like an oven, and what they can teach us about patience, timing, and resilience. So grab your iced tea, open your gardening journal, and let's uncover the quiet power waiting in the July soil. Part 1. The Sprinters. The power of starting fresh. Let's begin with what I like to call the sprinters, the crops that remind us how powerful a fresh start can be. In gardening, just like in life, we sometimes hold on too long. We keep giving space, water, and attention to something that has already stopped producing, simply because we have invested so much time in it. In the garden, that might be an old spring zucchini plant, covered in disease, barely hanging on, while we keep hoping it will somehow come back. But the soil teaches a very honest lesson. Sometimes the most productive thing you can do is pull up what is failing, clear the bed, refresh the soil, and plant again. 1 and 2. Cucumbers and zucchini, or summer squash too. The lesson here is simple. Let go of what is no longer working, so you can make room for fast, healthy new growth. Cucumbers and zucchini belong to the cucurbit family, and they are some of the fastest crops you can plant in July. The reason is the soil. By this time of year, the ground is warm from weeks of summer heat, and cucurbit seeds respond quickly. In the right moisture, they can germinate in only 3 to 4 days. From that tiny seed, you may be harvesting fresh cucumbers or tender summer squash in just 45 to 60 days. That means by mid to late August, while some gardeners are looking at tired, collapsing vines from spring, you can have young, vigorous plants just reaching their best production. The key with summer cucumbers is steady, deep moisture. Cucumbers do not forgive drought very well in July heat. When the plant gets stressed, it can produce a bitter compound called cucurbitacin, and that is when the fruit becomes bitter, misshapen, or unpleasant to eat. So do not let the soil swing from dry to soaked and back again. Water deeply, then mulch heavily with leaf litter or another organic mulch to hold moisture around the roots. And whenever possible, grow cucumbers vertically on a woven wire fence or trellis. It saves space, improves airflow, helps reduce powdery mildew, and makes harvesting much easier. 3. Bush beans, or snap beans. Bush beans teach us that timing matters. Pushing hard at the wrong moment can exhaust both plants and people. Beans love warm soil, so July can be an excellent time to sow them. But there is one important detail to understand. When daytime temperatures climb above 90 degrees Fahrenheit, or about 32 degrees Celsius, snap bean flowers may fail to pollinate. Instead of forming pods, the flowers simply drop from the plant. That sounds like a problem, but with July planting, we can use timing to our advantage. The plant does much of its leafy growth during the intense heat, then reaches the flowering and pod setting stage as the days begin to cool slightly in late August and September. For best results, sow the seeds directly into moist soil about 1 inch deep. Do not soak bean seeds before planting in hot soil, because they can rot before they sprout. And if you want a steady harvest instead of one big picking, plant a new row every 10 to 14 days. That succession planting can keep beans coming until the first frost. 4. Small melons. Like Kajari and Honey Rock small melons remind us that we do not always need to chase the biggest prize. Sometimes the smaller, faster win is exactly what keeps the season alive. If you plant a giant 20-pound watermelon in July, there is a good chance autumn will arrive before it ever has time to ripen. The days get shorter, the nights cool down, and the plant simply runs out of runway. So the smarter move is to choose smaller, personal-sized melons, such as Kajari or honey rock. Kajari is especially beautiful, with qualities that sit between cantaloupe and honeydew, and both types mature much faster than large melons. That makes them far better suited for a midsummer start. Melons are heavy feeders, so give them a strong foundation. Before planting, work 2 to 4 inches of rich organic compost into the bed. That gives the young vines the nutrient push they need for fast growth. And when you water, keep the leaves dry. Water at the base of the plant to reduce fungal problems, especially in humid late summer weather. 5. Fast maturing sunflowers. Sunflowers carry a beautiful reminder. Keep turning toward the light, even as the year begins to shorten. Many gardeners assume July is too late for sunflowers, especially the tall, dramatic ones. But if you choose fast-maturing varieties, such as the Procute series or Ruby Eclipse, you still have time. These varieties are bred to move quickly from seed to bloom, often in about 55 to 70 days. That means a July sowing can still give you a bright, powerful display before the season closes. Plant them in full sun, because sunflowers need strong light to grow well. And remember, late summer can bring heavy thunderstorms and strong winds. If possible, plant them near a fence or wall, or give them sturdy stakes as they grow. These plants rise quickly, and a little support at the right time can keep them standing tall when the weather turns rough. Part 2. The strategists. Adapting to the shifting tides. Now we move into the strategists, the crops that teach us how to adjust when the season begins to change. By late summer, the garden is not the same place it was in spring. The days slowly begin to shorten. The nights will eventually cool. The soil is still warm, the air can still feel heavy, but the rhythm of the season is shifting. And if you walk into July with the same mindset you used in April, you will make mistakes. A good gardener learns to read the season in front of them, not the season they wish they still had. And that is true in life as well. Sometimes we keep using an old strategy in a new situation, and then wonder why it no longer works. July asks us to adapt. Fall tomatoes. Fall tomatoes teach us to understand the limits of the season and focus our energy where it can still produce. In hot, humid southern gardens, spring tomatoes often begin to struggle by August. Disease builds up. Heat stress increases. Plants that look strong in May may be tired, spotted, and barely setting fruit later in summer. That is why July can be the right time to start a fall tomato crop. But there is one rule you cannot ignore. This is not the time for indeterminate vining tomatoes. They take too long, grow too large, and may be stopped by autumn frost before they can give you a proper harvest. For July planting, choose early determinate bush-type tomatoes that mature in 70 days or less. They stay compact, use their energy efficiently, and ripen better as fall weather cools. Tomatoes can pollinate themselves, but in the still, heavy heat of July, pollen can become sticky and fail to drop properly. So in the morning, gently shake the cages or stems to help move the pollen and improve fruit set. Also mulch deeply around the plants. Consistent soil moisture helps prevent blossom end rot, which often shows up when the roots go through repeated swings between too dry and too wet. 7. Spinach. Spinach teaches a very different lesson. When the environment is too harsh, shutting down can be a natural form of protection. Spinach loves cool weather. If you place spinach seed into July soil that is hotter than 80 degrees Fahrenheit, or about 26.7 degrees Celsius, the seed can enter a state called thermodormancy. In simple terms, the seed senses that the conditions are wrong. Its internal process slows down, it refuses to sprout, or it may simply rot in the soil. So yes, we can plant spinach in July for a fall harvest, but we have to help it get past the heat. The best method is to pre-sprout the seeds, soak them overnight, drain them well, then place them in a jar in the refrigerator for about a week. Another method is to sow them in seedling flats and keep those flats floating in a tub of cool water, which helps keep the root zone 10 to 15 degrees cooler than the surrounding air. Once the seedlings have sprouted, move them into the garden under shade cloth so they can establish without being crushed by the summer sun. 8. Swiss chard. Now, if spinach sounds like too much trouble in July, this is where Swiss chard earns its place. Swiss chard teaches us to stay steady under pressure. It handles heat far better than spinach, and it is not nearly as sensitive to changing day length. It does not panic and bolt as quickly. It simply keeps growing, sending up colorful, useful leaves, while other greens struggle. That is why chard is one of the most dependable crops for a summer to fall garden. It gives you the feel of leafy greens, without demanding the same cool conditions that spinach needs. Chard is also forgiving in the soil. It can tolerate slightly acidic conditions, even down to a pH around 6.0. To harvest it properly, take the outer leaves one by one and leave the center growing. This cut-and-come-again method allows the plant to keep producing fresh leaves from the middle, often continuing right up until the deep cold of winter finally stops it. 9. Short-day bulbing onions and shallots. Short-day onions and shallots teach us to protect the leaves that feed the future. Most gardeners think of onions as a spring crop, because many onions depend on increasing daylight to trigger bulb formation. But if you choose short-day varieties and start them from seed in July, they can grow through fall and still form bulbs when winter daylight drops to only 10 or 11 hours. The key is choosing the right type for the season. You are not forcing a spring crop to behave the same way in summer. You are selecting onions that match the light pattern ahead. Onions have shallow roots, so they do not compete well with weeds. Keep the bed clean and weeded, especially while the plants are young. You can snip a green leaf here and there to use like a spring onion, but do not take too many. Those green tops are the plant's solar panels. They capture light and send energy down into the developing bulb. Remove too many leaves, and the bulb will never reach its full strength. Part 3. The protectors and the upgraders. Now we come to the crops that teach us how to protect what we are growing. By late summer, the garden is not only fighting heat, it is also facing pests, fungal diseases, tired soil, heavy humidity, and plants that have been under pressure for weeks. If you have ever poured your heart into a garden bed, only to watch disease or insects take over almost overnight, you know how discouraging that can feel. This is the point in the season when good gardening becomes more than planting, it becomes protection. It becomes choosing stronger varieties, improving airflow, watering more wisely, and preparing for the colder months ahead. Prospera basil. Downy mildew-resistant basil is one of the great joys of summer. Its smell alone can make a garden feel alive. But by late summer, especially in warm and humid areas, basil often faces one of its biggest enemies, downy mildew. This disease can move quickly through the air and spread across leaves before many gardeners even realize what is happening. One week the plant looks green and full, and the next week the leaves may turn yellow, dark, weak, and unusable. That is why July is a smart time to start a fresh generation of basil. But instead of planting just any basil, choose a resistant type, such as the Prospera series. These F1 hybrids were bred to stand up much better against basil downy mildew, giving you a stronger chance of harvesting healthy leaves into late summer and fall. The lesson here is simple. When the environment becomes harder, you do not just hope for the best, you upgrade your defenses. Basil loves warmth, so July soil is not the problem. The real key is keeping the plant growing young and vigorous. Pinch off the top sets of leaves regularly. This prevents the plant from rushing into flowers and forces it to branch into a fuller, bushier shape. Water at the base instead of wetting the leaves. Wet foliage, poor airflow, and humid nights are exactly what fungal problems love. Keep basil warm, well pruned, and dry on the leaves, and it will reward you with that rich summer flavor for much longer. 11. Parsley. Parsley teaches another kind of protection, the value of shade. This plant is tougher than many people think. Parsley can survive very cold temperatures, even down near 10 degrees Fahrenheit, or about minus 12 degrees Celsius. But the harsh, humid sun of July is another story. Too much heat can push parsley to bolt, turn bitter, and look tired before it ever becomes useful in the kitchen. That is why starting parsley again in July can be such a good move. You are not planting it for a quick summer rush. You are preparing strong plants that can carry you through fall, and in many climates, deep into winter. Parsley seeds are slow. They can take 14 to 28 days to germinate, so patience matters here. Soak the seeds overnight before planting to help soften the seed coat and speed things along. For a July planting, the best trick is shelter. Sow parsley, where it receives protection from taller crops, larger plants, or the light shade of deciduous trees. It still needs light, but it does not need to be punished by the full force of the afternoon sun. There is no shame in giving a plant shelter. Sometimes shade is not weakness. Sometimes shade is exactly what allows a plant to stay useful, green, and strong. 12. Lemongrass. Lemongrass reminds us that not every crop has to be planted only for storage, calories, or survival. Some plants are worth growing because they bring scent, beauty, and joy. And July is a wonderful time for lemongrass because this plant loves heat. While many cool weather crops are struggling, lemongrass is just getting comfortable. It enjoys warm soil, strong light, and consistent moisture. In colder regions, lemongrass will not survive freezing winter outdoors. But if you start it from seed in July, you can still grow a beautiful, fragrant clump in a container. It can decorate a patio, freshen up the garden, and give you stalks and leaves to use in cooking. Grow it in a large pot with soil that stays evenly moist but drains well. Do not let the roots sit in soggy soil, but do not let the container dry out completely either. Before the first fall frost, bring the pot indoors to a sunny room or sunroom. That way, the bright citrus fragrance can stay with you long after the summer garden has faded. Sometimes, the garden feeds the body. Sometimes it feeds the spirit. Lemongrass does both. 13. Butternut squash. Butternut squash is a crop of preparation. It teaches us to build strength now, so we have something to carry us through the cold season later. Many gardeners know the frustration of growing zucchini or other summer squash, only to lose plants to squash vine borers. These pests can hollow out stems and collapse a healthy-looking plant with heartbreaking speed. But butternut squash has a natural advantage. Its stems are firmer and tougher than many summer squashes, making it much more resistant to vine borer damage. Planting it in July can also help it avoid some of the worst early summer pest pressure while still giving it time to mature for a fall harvest. Give butternut squash a strong start by planting it on raised mounds or raised beds about 8 to 10 inches high. This helps water drain away from the roots and allows more air into the soil. Squash roots need moisture, but they also need oxygen. Butternut usually takes about 90 to 100 days to mature, so July planting is a race with purpose. By fall, the fruits should be ready to cure. Let them harden in the sun after harvest. Then store them in a cool basement or pantry. That is the beauty of this crop. You plant it in the heat, you care for it through the transition, and months later, when the garden is quiet and the days are cold, it is still feeding you. Part 4. The Visionaries. Trusting the unseen. A garden is never just food for the body. If you stay with it long enough, it becomes medicine for the soul as well. And these final crops ask us to look beyond quick harvests and immediate results. They ask us to become visionaries. They teach one of the deepest lessons a gardener can learn: how to trust what is happening beneath the surface, even when nothing visible has appeared yet. Zinnias. Zinnias teach us the beautiful paradox of generosity. The more you give away, the more abundant you become. If you want a flower that can handle July with confidence, zinnias deserve a place in your garden. They are some of the hardest working flowers of the summer season. Their seeds germinate quickly, often in just 5 to 7 days, and they actually enjoy the heat that makes many other plants slow down. In about 8 weeks, they can move from seed to bloom, which means planting them in July can still give you a bright, colorful display through September and even into October. And the best part is how they respond to harvest. Zinnias are cut-and-come-again flowers. That means the more you cut them, the more they branch, and the more blooms they produce. So do not be afraid to bring them indoors. Put them in a jar on your kitchen table, or share a handful with a neighbor. Every clean cut encourages the plant to send out more stems and more flowers. Give them full sun, because zinnias need strong light to bloom well. Also make sure the soil drains properly. They do not like sitting in wet, heavy ground. With sun, airflow, and regular cutting, zinnias can turn a tired late summer garden into a place that feels alive again. 15. Perennial flowers: echinacea, penstemon, foxglove, and black-eyed Susan. Perennial flowers teach us something quieter, but even more powerful. True growth often begins in the dark. The cold does not always destroy the seed. Sometimes, it is exactly what breaks the shell open. This may be one of the garden's deepest secrets. When you sow perennial seeds like echinacea, penstemon, foxglove, or black-eyed Susan in late July or August, you are not planting them because you expect a big show of flowers right away. In many cases, you will not see much this year at all. And that is the point. Many of these wild and native-style perennial seeds need a natural process called cold-moist stratification. In simple terms, they need time in cold, damp conditions before they are ready to germinate properly. Winter becomes part of the planting process. The freezing wind, the wet soil, the snow, and the long, dark months help soften or crack the hard outer seed coat, preparing that seed for spring. To plant them well, do not dig the bed deeply. Deep tilling often brings buried weed seeds to the surface and creates more work later. Instead, gently loosen just the top inch of soil. Scatter the seeds where you want them to grow, then press them lightly into the earth. Many perennial seeds need some light to germinate, so do not bury them too deeply. And always mark the spot clearly, because by spring, it is easy to forget what you planted and accidentally disturb the bed. Then you wait. While the garden above ground may look quiet, those seeds are going through their own hidden preparation. They rest through the coldest months, and when the season turns, they begin building roots first. That invisible root system is what gives them strength. Later, when the time is right, they rise into flowers that can return year after year. And that is the kind of growth we often forget to honor. Outro. Are you in a season of waiting right now? Does it feel like you are buried in the dark, carrying the heat of summer or the cold of winter, wondering why you are not blooming yet? Look at the garden. Look at the spinach seed waiting for cooler water. Look at the perennial seed lying quietly in the freezing soil. Not every seed opens the moment we plant it. Not every effort gives us instant reward. But if you care for the soil, if you respect the season you are in, and if you keep showing up, the future can become more beautiful than you imagined. July is not the end of the line. It is an invitation to begin again. Do not let the heat convince you to quit. Step back into the garden. Press a few more seeds into the warm earth. Water them with patience. Protect them with care. And let nature remind you that resilience is not always loud. Sometimes it is a tiny seed, waiting in the dark, preparing for its moment to rise. If this video spoke to your heart today, give it a thumbs up, share it with someone who needs a little second spring inspiration, and subscribe to Earthly Delights. Until next time, keep digging, keep dreaming, and never stop growing. I will see you in the garden.